Hello and welcome to the CX Files for November 13th, 2025. My name is Mark Hillary and I'm in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
And I'm Peter Ryan in Montreal. Mark, great to see you, and really excited to be back with you, having another one of our wonderful chats about the wonderful world of CX.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got a good discussion with an independent consultant this week. Gerry Brown contacted me on LinkedIn and commented on a couple of episodes. And I looked at his profile. He runs an organization called the Customer Lifeguard, which does training, advisory work. And he's written a book called When a Customer Wins, Nobody Loses. But if you look at some of the organizations that he's been an advisor at, then there's some big organizations. He's based in the UK, so most of them are UK based, but it's like big utilities, rail companies, even the Royal Albert Hall ticketing system. There's all kinds of different types of organization that he's gone into work with. But I thought it was interesting that most of his advisory work was end users. So we had a conversation about advising the end users, what's changed in the last few years, what are they looking for from BPOs, are they doing more internal work rather than going with BPOs. So we had a good discussion, and we really sort of looked at this whole idea of putting the customer first. Does it still apply in a modern CX environment?
And I'm really glad that you qualified that Gerry lives in the UK and that he comes from effectively an analysis and a BPO background, Mark, and that we are not talking about the former governor of California and presidential candidate, just to be very, very clear about that. But no, in all seriousness, this is great that you were able to catch up with Gerry and to find out a little bit about what his thoughts are, because I don't think this is a discussion that we have often enough. Aligning the needs of the end user, the client, with an outsourcer is something that's almost been a bit of a magic bullet or a golden key in the space for quite some time. And I'd be curious to get a sense from you, if you can tease a little bit here about what Gerry's thoughts were, broadly speaking, some of the broader themes that he teases out in the course of the interview about what outsourcers need to be thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, really what we were looking at is whether you need outsourcers, whether you need BPO or whether you can do stuff easily in-house yourself. So we know that probably three-quarters of organizations handle customer service internally themselves and don't even go to BPO companies. So we were certainly talking about this and why do organizations prefer to do this, and that comes down to the argument of how can a BPO position itself to be essential and useful compared to companies being able to do this internally.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it's true. Finding out what the BPO can do, how the BPO can be relevant, how can they do it better and more cost effective than doing it in-house is very much, I think, the cornerstone of what the relationships are all about these days. And Mark, let's be perfectly frank. I know that all the BPOs will say, oh, no, no, we're a quality play, we're a quality play. But the reality is, too, affordability does come into it. There's a reason why an enterprise will go and look to try and work with a third party. Cost is always going to be a factor. It's not a cheap thing to do to run a CX operation in-house anymore. It never, frankly, it never has been. And any organization that thinks it is, I think, needs to think again in terms of the type of quality that they're going to be delivering to their end users. Sometimes it pays off to say, I'm going to move at least part of this function over to a third party because they just might be able to do it more efficiently, drive more value in the long run for us.
Yeah, and certainly in the last decade, it's become much more complex. Operating in a multi-channel environment, expecting to cope with social media in addition to email and calls.
Yeah.
The traditional channels that we've always been used to. And then you now add on to that the demands from so many people for more increased automation and AI. So once you start requiring all this kind of expertise, then certainly there is more of an argument for working with a BPO.
Yeah, 100%. Well, let's head on over to the chat you had with Gerry Brown so that we can find out a little bit more of his views. I think it'll be fantastic.
Hello, Gerry. It's great to get you on the podcast. Now, I saw your book, When a Customer Wins, Nobody Loses, was published about 7 years ago, 2018.
That's right.
What do you think has changed in that time? I mean, is that basic message still true, or has something about the message of the book changed, maybe because of the pandemic?
Well, I think that if you think about the rationale behind the title was that when I started thinking about it, and I started thinking about it from a customer perspective, not just from a practitioner perspective. And I thought the basic premise I started out with was that customer experience, customer service, whatever you want to call it, can't be a zero-sum game where, I win, you lose, or vice versa. So that's where the title came from. The thinking about it was that in any interaction with an organization, irrespective of whether they're a big organization, government, whatever it happens to be, if I'm the customer, the consumer, whatever I am, I shouldn't come out of that thinking, well, that was awful, I lost, in other words. And when I defined a win, what I was defining as a win was really, did I get out of that call what I thought I either deserved or that I'm happy with? And those two things might not be the same thing. So it's an example, and the examples I use are sort of like a refund. So I'm one of these people, and many people probably have subscriptions, and quite often I take out a subscription, even a trial subscription, and I forget to cancel it. And then, all of a sudden pops up, you've just been billed for this. More often than not, I'm able to get hold of the company, either by email, chat, whatever it happens to be. And I say, well, I didn't mean to do this, blah, blah, blah. And they say, okay, no problem. We'll cancel it and refund you. Fine. So I've had some experiences that weren't as good as that. So that's just me describing sort of the concept of the book. And so answering your original question, I made a few tweaks. You're right. I wrote it in 2018. I made a few tweaks in 2019, maybe just to update some company information. But frankly, it hasn't changed because I go back to that book from time to time. I sort of recycle some of the areas in there for some current blogs, current presentations that I'm doing. And frankly, very little of it. I do read it. I go, you know what? This is exactly the same. And so I think that things haven't changed. The pandemic, in terms of, what did it do? And after the pandemic, and for quite some time, I wrote a piece called, the new normal. And what I was trying to say is, there is no new normal, because everyone was going, oh, it's a new normal. Well, no, it hasn't changed. And I think what we learned from that, organizations for many years have still been going, oh, due to high call volumes, due to they're still blaming the pandemic. So they're blaming everything except their own organization. So again, the long answer to your question, no, I don't think things have changed, maybe in some subtle areas, but broadly speaking, the things I wrote in 2018, I still stand by.
We just had a slight delay on the line just at the end there, but I think that's okay. I'll just clip this little bit in between questions.
Sure, that's one of the beauties of Zoom when you do this.
Yeah, absolutely, and also when it's not live. Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
When I was getting ready to talk to you, I took a look at some of the companies that you've been working with. You do your workshops and your advisory work, and I could see that they're mostly end user companies rather than the CX specialists, the BPOs. I mean, how are those companies kind of approaching their CX strategy today then? I mean, are most of them still interested in maintaining this in-house, or do you see that more of them are looking to work with CX specialists like the BPOs?
Well, it's interesting because I do quite a lot of judging. I judge the EXA Awards here in the UK. I judge the awards for Engaged Business Media, and quite a few of those, the presentations, the companies that are presenting, whilst they're end user companies, quite often are either in doing it with a BPO or it's the BPO presenting. And I think what I'm seeing is that many organizations are beginning, or I won't say beginning, but are looking at BPOs for not all of their customer interactions, but certainly looking at it to offset perhaps either time zone differentials, perhaps language issues, perhaps just straight cost. So I think there are more companies doing that. And I think in respect of how the BPOs are responding, I think, again, did some judging this week with 3 or 4 BPOs. And I think the thing that has changed for them is they recognize it's not just bums on seats and the cheapest price. They've got to do more to show the organization that is their client that they care as much as their customer service people. Not always easy to do, as you well know. I know you have a lot of experience in the BPO world, but I think that's one thing I am seeing, that people are beginning to use them more, if not for everything, but certainly for either certain situations. And so I think that is changing somewhat.
Yeah, and I mean, I actually just had a conversation this morning before we got on this call, and it was with someone from one of the biggest BPOs, and I think he echoed exactly your point just now, that they are moving away from just selling staffing and contact center solutions and moving to actually selling a complete CX, customer experience solution, and whether that includes contact centers or includes AI or cloud services or whatever, but it's up to them now to sell that complete solution.
I think what you say is true, because one of the things I did spend some time on, and I know we're going to talk about AI as well, but I've been doing some strategic advisory work with an AI company that was born out of South Africa, and as a result, they had lots of relationships with BPOs in South Africa. And we started talking to more and more BPOs. And again, thinking of the fact that that might sound counterintuitive for a BPO to use an AI solution, in this case, conversational AI. What we found was actually the BPO said, you know what, we need to be able to offer this to our customers. So, to your point, offering a broader solution, offering a number of things that customer themselves may not necessarily have invested in, because people are still not so sure about AI. So if you've got an AI solution that can help me as a client deflect some of the calls, handle some of the calls, triage some of the calls, as a BPO, then I'm going to be more appealing to my client base than I was before.
Yeah, and I can see that you've worked with quite a few different types of organization from different industries, but are there like a few recurring problems that you still see clients talking about? Are there the sort of these staples that just keep on returning?
There are, and one of the things that I see is I have a fairly strong background in what is now called CRM. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, before the internet even started, when I was still in Canada, I was working with an organization. I had a small business then, and I took on the distributorship for what was then called contact management solutions. Again, before the internet, before people were able to download stuff, and it was a tough sell, frankly, but I learned a lot about contact management. And then as that evolved, when I came to the UK, I came over to the UK working with Genesis, and then started to work a lot with Salesforce. So I saw, the CRM boom, some of the companies that are no longer with us. But what I started to see was, organizations, using CRM, in some cases well, in some cases not. But what I saw was that, and I worked with a large UK retailer back about 10 years ago. And one of the biggest challenges they had, and it even popped up again yesterday. I was chairing a conference in London. I was doing a panel with some people. And one of the issues that came up was the fact that many organizations, as in this case, it was an airline, but retail, still using a lot of legacy. They're stuck with legacy. And therefore, getting the data in one place or getting the data in an easily transferable or movable way, it was difficult 10 years ago, and apparently it still is. And so what you'd hear when I did side by sides with agents was they would say things like, I've got to scroll through so many screens, I've lost a will to live. And this is still out there. There's still people going, oh, this system. So despite the progress made with integration, despite the fact that systems integration companies are everywhere, the solutions are there, the SaaS solutions are there. This is one thing I still see as a challenge for many businesses, both on the CRM side. And yesterday, when I was chairing this conference, it was all about data insight and analytics. And the same thing there, bringing all of the data, because now, of course, we're in this large data lake world, and people want to bring all of that together. Again, finding ways, solutions, and we know the solutions are there. So it's not clear really why they're having troubles. But those are the things that I still see popping up that haven't changed dramatically for many businesses.
Yeah, and that leads me to, it makes me think about the MIT report that came out recently, looking at how are companies making use of AI in this area. And I think it was something like 95% are not able to scale up from pilots to full enterprise solutions. And the number one cause for that was the disorganized data. It was that they've got 100 different databases all over the place, different systems. There's so much legacy tech that they can't actually go to this streamlined sort of system. And I was thinking about, what have you seen clients using AI well and managing to do this successfully, or have you seen pilots that have scaled up very well, or are most of your clients really still struggling with this?
Well, it's interesting because I said I did a couple of years strategic advisory with an AI company, and at that point, and that started in 2022. It was quite difficult to get people to really, even with a pilot, to bring it on board. But what I am seeing, because as I mentioned, doing this judging, I see lots of examples of AI. Where it's being successful, I think, is in a couple of areas. Whether you want to call it co-pilot or agent assist or this type of thing. And I think when we think about many of the doomsayers, AI is taking over the world, all the jobs are going to be lost. I think what we're seeing is those kinds of applications. So where an agent is able to get information quickly, and notwithstanding what I just said about the CRM, but where they are able to get agent or information quickly, that's timely and accurate. So where they have things like summarization, so an agent finishes a call, and rather than having to take lots of wrap time to go in and make all of those changes, the whole conversation is summarized because it's been recorded. And it's consistent and it's standard. So the next agent that picks that call up will see exactly what happened on that call. So I think those kinds of things are working. QA is working quite well. You think about many of the companies in the financial services industry that have to have compliance. So you've got people in their QA team listening to, well, they're trying to listen to all the calls, but they can't. They can't listen to 100% of the calls. QA, AI, and QA is being very successful in being able to do that, picking out, if there's key words, key phrases, all of that stuff. So I think that's where it's working well. And organizations, again, some of the judging I've been doing, I've been seeing organizations that are using that and have been successful in scaling it. Because again, they're not, I think the reason for it is they're not trying to roll that out to, to have thousands of agents, in that field, but they are using it to give the agents the support they need. But I also see it, I mentioned conversational AI, I think that's working. A course that I deliver for the CCMA is all about AI and perhaps the differences between a really dumb chatbot. We hate chatbot. Oh yeah, we hate oh, they're awful. Well, we hate them because they go, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. They're not trained in the way that a conversational AI. So conversational AI using natural language understanding, natural language processing that has lots of things in it. It understands intents, it understands multiple entities, all the things that are big things in AI can be very effective. And again, I've seen that work quite well. In many cases, just triage. So it could be just simple ID and V. The caller comes in rather than the agent doing it. It could be for Wismo, where's my order? some of the more simple things are working quite well. And so, not saying you've got to use this for everything, but where you can take away some of that really mundane stuff, and we hear this all the time, leaving the agents for the more complex issues, I think is working. So I think it's a bit of a suck it and see for some companies, but I think they are finding ways in which they can use it effectively, and where it's paying off both in terms of customer experience, employee experience, and cost saving.
Yeah, and when you were talking about the BPOs, you were talking there about moving to complete solutions rather than just focusing on the agents only.
Yes.
But certainly a lot of the discussion in the industry is still around, like, why are so many BPO contracts still priced by FTE when the solution itself is so much more complex? Is that something that companies are doing internally as well? I mean, let's say you're talking to someone who's got an internal contact center. Are they mainly looking at the cost of that in terms of the FTEs, or are we developing a more sophisticated understanding of how much it costs?
I think they are. I think there is, the companies that are forward thinking are definitely doing that. I've had those kinds of discussions where, sometimes I get involved, I get engaged on the basis of a customer experience strategy review. So, are we doing the right things? Are we saying the right things, and so on? More often than not, that will move into a technology phase, because quite often, again, if I was doing a side by side with an agent, they might say, Gerry, we really want to do a great job, but our systems are crap, or our CRM's no good. So you start to then look at that, and so you start to have those discussions with the organization about the fact that you're really not helping your agents in doing that. So I think people that are willing to take that on board are more willing to look at that and say, right, well, that is, we have to look at that as a cost of doing business. And whilst you see some of the deployments, and again, some of the judging I've been doing where they start talking about saving FTEs, hopefully what they're doing is they're redeploying them as opposed to letting them go. But that's their call. But I think we are seeing more organizations recognizing that cost savings alone for deploying an AI solution is not the right move. If it's not improving customer and employee experience, then it's the wrong thing. But that will be one of the consequences, that if they are looking at that big picture and saying, right, well, if we are going to do this, if we are going to deploy a new solution, we have to look at it in terms of how it's helping us. And if it does enable us to save some time and some FTE, fine, and then that's a bonus. So I think more people are looking at the bigger picture and taking these things into consideration.
Okay. And I was going to ask you about the sort of waves of change since the pandemic, because it's only 5 years, but we've seen two enormous changes in the industry: the move to work from home and the introduction of AI as well, both inside the contact center as well as customer facing. So has this changed the projects you're working on, or any of the workshops you're asked to deliver?
I'd say in some respects it has, because I recall back probably early 2000s talking about what was then just called remote working. And many organizations, when I worked for Genesis as an example, many organizations were interested in doing that. It was no pandemic. They just thought that would probably be a good way of encouraging people, and certainly at that point it was for people that perhaps were less mobile. So it could be disabled people, it could be mothers working from home, and so on. But the technology at that point simply wasn't there. You used to get your own phone line, and then you have to, well, how do we get the data? All kinds of things. And do we really trust them? Are they going to be watching Coronation Street rather than actually working? So many years ago, I think that was challenging. But of course, the pandemic did open up that whole world, not just in terms of course, the fact that people didn't have to go to the office, but the fact that technology was there, that people, perhaps hadn't explored it to the extent that they could and should. So of course, we saw this explosion, and I remember again doing some co-hosting some conferences where people were saying, well, we brought when it happened, we realized we had to work from home very quickly. And they were surprised at how quickly, in many cases, they could deploy the solutions. I remember, talking to a very large organization here in the UK that said, boy, we brought the providers in, and they had us up and running in a matter of, weeks, if not days. So I think what we saw from that was that, firstly, the belief, or if like the confidence in more quick deployments, and of course the mostly SaaS models was one big change. The work from home dilemma, of course, is this now cultural one. Should we, should they all come back to the office? Do we get better interactions between our people if they see, and all of that? I think what we've seen with the hybrid models, where people are able to come in, 2 days a week, whatever it happens to be, where they still have the capability to work from home. I think we've seen less issues in terms of concerns about data and privacy and all those kind of things. I don't think we've seen a lot of those stories come out. So I think that it's changed in the sense that people's confidence in the technology has improved. Their confidence in the fact that people can work from home successfully, whether or not they want them to in the long term, and whether or not they're going to drag them back in the office is another discussion. But I think in terms of that, I think it has worked well. Unfortunately, it took a pandemic to make it work.
Yeah. And I mean, we're rushing towards the end of the year here. I mean, looking forward to 2026, what are the sort of CX trends that you're looking at, or that you think might be important as we go into the new year?
Well, I think the AI discussion is a big one. There's no question about that. So I think the capabilities, as the capabilities expand, and they're expanding very quickly. I think that's the one thing when I go to conferences and listen to people speak about, they talk about the deployment of the internet, when late 90s, how long it took the internet to really gather pace, and then more mobile solutions and so on. And I think what we've seen is that the move to AI and AI solutions are changing dramatically. So even if 6 months ago he said, oh, this stuff still doesn't look good, now it's got a lot better. So I think people are going to depend on that, quite a bit more. I think we're seeing also with customer experience, although it's been tied to employee experience in the past, I think we're seeing again an increase in that. I know it's very simplistic, the Richard Branson, happy employees, happy customers, but I do think that is becoming a reality, at least for many people, and going, yeah, if our people aren't happy, and whether being happy means having technology that works, being able to work from home not whenever they want, but with a reasonable schedule, having people around them that are supportive rather than not. And in many of the cases, again, some of the judging, which is a great place for me to see some great examples, they're talking about less focus on things like average handle time. So from a customer experience perspective, one of the things I've talked about for a long time, and in fact, I think I even put it in the book, was the fact that when I look at measurement, when I look at organizations that measure average handle time and then beat the agents over the head with it, I say to them, well, that's crazy. What you've got to look at is, are there other elements? So if you say, well, our average handle time should be 3.5 minutes, but we've got an agent here that's consistently at 5 or 6 minutes. Well, look at what the other metrics are. Is their retention rate higher? Or are they generating more sales and so on? So I think what we're seeing, and again, I remember this from a presentation this week, where organizations are saying, yes, we may use AHT as a global measure just to see the effectiveness or the efficiency of the contact center, but we're not using it. And this was a fairly well-known private medical supplier who said, depending on the type of call, we're letting the advisor, the agent, whatever we choose to call them, we're letting them sort of do their own thing, if you will. So if they're having a good call, and rather than looking at it from the perspective of, did they meet all the compliance needs? Did they tick all the QA boxes? Was the outcome in terms of customer experience a really positive one? Yes, it was. Well, fine. We'll go with that. So I think what we're seeing is moving away from tick box types at least in contact sense, tick box types of evaluation what we heard one presenter say was talking about what they call dynamic AHT, which I thought was interesting. So depending on the type of call, depending on the type of customer, et cetera, et cetera. So I think what we're seeing is, I'll call it perhaps a more humane view of CX, at least from the agent's perspective. I think that's one of the things that I see, because I do a lot of these kinds of things, and I see, I have no reason not to believe that they're doing it, but I think that's what we're seeing, and people are recognizing that there are many more options now, especially if you can work from home. Well, I want to keep that person, because they're, if I have to hire somebody else, well, it's going to cost me a lot of money. So I think we're seeing that as a trend towards, organizations recognizing how valuable their people are. And of course, part of that message is please don't worry as much about AI as you have done, even if, yes, there will be some job losses, but we want to help you with AI rather than use it as a threat.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the message about metrics like AHT is really important. That we've had a lot of guests on this podcast in the last few months talking about how do you seriously generate revenue from customer engagement? And if you're trying to do things like encourage loyalty or cross-sell or upsell, then you need to be having good, detailed conversations. It's not that, 3 minutes and that's the cutoff point. You just can't do that.
Yes. And again, I think that's where AI can help. So if it's taking some of those mundane calls, some of those, what are your opening hours? Where do I get this? What, those kinds of things. Then again, you can demonstrate to your teams that, this is the reason we're doing this. We're not doing it to get rid of you. We're doing it to give you more time to spend on these. It may sound obvious, I know that, but sometimes you have to say it. You can't, and you have to, I guess you also have to say, well, this is the way we're going to operate. We're not going to be just looking at your AHT. We're going to look at it in terms of how well you've done in terms of customer outcomes, because that's for both customers and the advisor. That's the holy grail.
Okay, that's great. And then, just to wrap up, then, what is your business looking at for next year? Do you have any sort of theme or area of focus that you're exploring?
Well, I think the thing for me personally, because my business is basically me, and I'm a single practitioner, and I look at, I guess, the kinds of things that how can I influence people? What can I do? So I do a lot more speaking. So I do things like, creating courses. So I like delivering that kind of stuff. And I think in terms of the kinds of things that I look at is, trying to maintain as much as I can the information. So the information flow is changing all the time. So trying to be relevant, continuing to be relevant to a broad range of customers. As you mentioned, I have had a lot of different customers. I've never focused on any one particular area. So I think it's being able to be relevant to people. This is the reason I speak at conferences. I do webinars, I do podcasts. So I think continuing to be engaged with as many people, to get as many different views as I can, sharing things with you is for me the best way I can continue to grow. As you can see, I know this is an audio podcast, but for anyone that knows me, they know that I've been doing this for a very, very long time. So it's not like I'm trying to build world domination or anything like that. I'm out there to try and help people make the best of what is sometimes a challenging environment in customer experience and customer service. And if I can do that in an effective way that is easy on their pocketbook, shall we say, and I'm not in there bringing in 25 people, I think that's really where I hope to take it. So it's enjoyable. I think we're seeing tremendous change. I've seen tremendous change in my business life, certainly. I started working with Bell Canada in the late 70s, so you can imagine how many changes have taken place since then. So for me, it's just, again, I use that same phrase, being relevant, being interested, being curious, and being able to share that with people.
All right, that's a perfect place to stop. And given how busy a lot of people are in Q4, it's a positive way to look forward to 2026. So thanks very much, Gerry. Thank you.
My pleasure, Mark.